has been, as I said, a very long day. You guys have been through so many judging presentations, activities. We really hope that you had a positive and rewarding experience at your time here at UC Berkeley today. And before we begin awards, I would like to say some closing remarks for everyone here. So first and foremost, I would like to take a moment to thank the BioEHSC Competition Committee and my junior chair, Armand Devedi, for committing a tremendous amount of time to make this competition a reality. There were many hardships to overcome this year, especially dealing with the logistics of coming back in person for the first time in 2 years. And they've worked very, very hard to make sure that you all have a fun experience and get all the pluses of being able to be in a first in-person competition and explore bioengineering through this opportunity. I would also like to thank all of our former BioEHSC chairs, especially Jason, Vicky, and Nick, for their valuable advice and insight throughout our planning. This would not be at all possible without them, so can we please give them a round of applause? The keynote speaker, Dr. Ming, is not here anymore, but I would like to thank her as well for her truly inspiring speech and taking out her time from her insanely busy schedule today. And finally, I want to thank also the bioengineering faculty, the graduate students, postdocs, and institute members that took their time to review student presentations and give valuable feedback to the competitors. And last but not the least, we really appreciate our faculty advisor, Professor Leitman, and our wonderful and patient volunteers who have been critical to the success of today's competition. And now, I want to address the competitors directly. So, wow, what a day. But before I begin, I want to ask a couple of questions. How many of you have heard or have seen the movie Pirates of the Caribbean? Okay, quite a lot. That's good for my speech. And how many of you watched Disney's Tangled? Okay, even more, I like that. And finally, how many people have listened to or like listening to Taylor Swift? Alright. This part is not relevant to my speech, but I like to gauge out my Swifties in the audience. But I swear, the first two will make sense soon. So, way back when I was just 4 years old, I had my first shot at fame. Let's see if you can find me in that picture up there. But this was my city's newspaper, and our school was featured. I had moved around a lot when I was a kid. I lived in India, I lived in UK, and I came here to the United States, living in Sunnyvale, California. And I was always, and I have always been, maybe a little annoying, but very talkative and always asking questions. So even here, maybe you can see me at the very edge, barely making the cut for the paper, and it kind of looks like I'm still waving to some kid on the other side trying to talk to them. But what the kicker was for most people was that I always introduced myself as Dr. Reet. And like any painting I drew, any person I met, my introduction was like, "Hi, I'm Dr. Reet." Like, you can imagine 4-year-olds just walking to people, introducing themselves as Dr. Reet. And I'm still not sure how that began. Honestly, I just think I saw a sign somewhere that said Dr. Smith or something, and I liked the ring of it, and I just went on introducing myself as that. But as I grew up, this still tended to stick with me. I knew that I wanted to be in some kind of role where I could help directly. And at the time, also because I didn't have much exposure, being a doctor seemed like the best way to go. So, in high school, like many of you, I was involved in a myriad of activities. From Science Olympiad to Red Cross to soccer, I loved being engaged and learning new things. However, when summer came along, I was in for a shock. It started my freshman year when my friend had asked me if I wanted to do this competition with her called MIT Inspire. I had no idea what that was, but I was like, why not? And I just said yes. And I have to say, I actually did not know anything about the field or whatever their topics were going into the competition. And I literally searched top research questions in science and went through hundreds and hundreds of lists until I found one that kind of piqued my interest. And I did. I found something on behavioral epigenetics, and eventually wrote this paper called Behavioral Epigenetics, the key to unlocking the most daunting mysteries of human. Obviously, I thought I was doing something revolutionary just by reading some literature, and maybe by the title you could see this was very much my first time even trying to do something like this. But the whole idea for the competition was to write a paper, and I had no idea how to. In fact, this was my introduction of the paper. You can take a minute to read it. It's basically a story. I thought I was in some creative writing assignment class and I had to come up with some background. And it's like the stories about how this family gets into an accident and how that affects everything. Very clearly what you have not done in your introductions today. But no matter how terrible my first try was, I loved it. I enjoyed researching and learning about the topic, only to find out one day, on the day of the submission deadline, that I was actually not eligible to submit this paper. This competition was only for US citizens and permanent residents, and although I have lived in the US for more than 11 years, I was on an H-4 visa, which is a dependent visa on my dad's H-1B visa. You see, I am a documented dreamer, a term I recently learned after years and years of confusion. Essentially, documented dreamers are children that arrive with parents with work visas in the US at a very young age. I came when I was 8 years old. And due to the backlog of obtaining green cards in our country, a lot of us age out when we turn 21. This means that we cannot remain in the country and have to self-deport, often to a home country we have never lived in. And while this is an issue I'm facing now, in high school, my biggest issue was that I had many restrictions on the types of activities I could pursue, types of internships I could apply for, and I could not work. I was not allowed to get paid. And no matter my interests, I was always a very curious person, but I had a lot of restrictions in that area. But in 10th grade, a friend of mine, again, these friends really come in clutch, introduced me to the BioEHSC competition. And this was one of the very few competitions that was inclusive for me and established in such a way that it was a pivotal moment in my life. I still remember the tantalizing energy as I walked into Stanley Hall, where it was held my first year. Just like you, the 7 weeks this competition provided me was like no other. For the first time, I could actually learn by myself, with my friends, what engineering is and how to create a research project, and how we write introductions in a way that we do not make up fake backup stories for characters in our research paper. I faced the same grueling nights that took, taking multiple takes of the video, creating last-minute presentations, but somehow pulling through in the end. And what this competition provided me, especially for someone with very restricted opportunities, was an avenue to explore what life is like as a scientist, and learn what the engineering design process was like. This was the first step that catalyzed my interest in bioengineering. Most importantly, it taught me that life has a funny way of connecting things when you truly do things that align with your passion, even if you don't know what that is yet. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So remember the epigenetics paper I did in freshman year? I never went back into that field and instead ended up exploring other BioE topics in future research competitions throughout high school. But now I do research in the Streets Lab at UC Berkeley, which focuses on creating visualization tools for epigenomic data. Somehow, even though I chose one question out of hundreds and hundreds on that paper because I just thought it sounded cool, it gave me the exposure to eventually get into the field I'm now most passionate about, computational biology and personalized medicine, which I can pursue here at Berkeley by double majoring in bioengineering and EECS and by conducting research with the Brenner Lab and the Streets Lab. Now, I asked at the very beginning if any of you watched Pirates of the Caribbean. Some of you said yes, and what I want to talk about is one of our favorite characters. Can anyone say who that is? Yes, Captain Jack Sparrow. While Jack is often getting into trouble and often a nice comedic relief, there is one thing that has always stuck out to me about him: his compass. This is because his compass isn't an ordinary compass. Everyone jokes about how it's broken since it never points north. But instead, what they don't know is that it actually points to what his heart truly desires. I know this is a little filmy, a little dramatic, but this is a philosophy I have followed throughout my whole life. I truly believe that in the moment, if there is something that catches your interest, or you have curiosity about something, you should follow it. Because curiosity is a funny thing. It's not driven by desire or a need for success. It's something as innate as laughter. It's just something that drives you to do something just for the heck of it. The second thing I would like for you to take away from today is that sharing your knowledge is just as important as gaining it. And caring and compassion is an exceptional strength to your character in any field you venture into. Whether you go into business or bioengineering, our goals as scientists and engineers is to care for people. Dr. Vivian Ming put it so beautifully in today's keynote speech. And at the end of the day, what she said is that we need people who are driven to do things because they truly care. There are so many big issues we face today, from global warming to pandemics. And you've already experienced a lot of this in your high school experience. It seems like the news gives bad news every single day. But there is a silver lining. As the future generation, you have already shown exceptional growth, creativity, and care for what you do. Before we can solve all these problems, as students, the best you can do is learn and follow whatever your interest is. You'll only be able to contribute most in places you love, and you don't have to figure it all out now. So, I talked about the Disney movie Tangled. It's one of my favorites. I think it's a lot of people's favorites, actually. But while I like the cinematography and the dialogue, I'm always taken aback by this line that is quoted. When Rapunzel sees the shining lanterns, she asks Flynn Rider, "What do I do now that I've completed my dream?" Who responds, "I guess that's the best part. You get to pick a new dream." One of my dreams ever since I came into freshman year at UC Berkeley is to stand at the stage before you and actually be here giving this talk and leading this competition. To be able to give back to something that has helped me immensely has been an incredible experience, and standing here, I'm so happy that I've fulfilled one of my dreams. And maybe it's time for me to pick a new dream, maybe changing the meaning of Dr. Reet to something else. The Dr. Reet that I grew up with probably will not happen, but maybe a different Dr. Reet might happen. As for you, I hope that you pick new dreams, live new lives, reinvent yourself over and over again as long as you get to reach a state of contentness. Not satisfied, but content, like sitting at the table over the holidays with your family. With your future career paths and every great thing that I know you will do, I hope you chase the feeling of completeness. So the cycle of adventure starts all over again whenever you find something else that piques your interest. You have all been phenomenal today. And no matter what the awards are, know that you should be very, very, very proud of yourselves for coming this far, and you have a very bright future ahead. I've taken up a lot of time, so without further ado, we will begin the awards.